is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He moves in the shadow between his main house and the clubhouse, Stu Horvath.
Man, it's raining tonight, so it would be nice if that was true.
Man, I'm shocked with all the renovations you did in the backyard, laying the patio, like the fire pit, that you didn't just make a really short little covered walkway to and fro.
A little pergola or something.
Pergola.
You know, honestly, if I do anything, I should put like a little awning over the frickin' door. It bothers me.
Actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know why it never occurred to me, but I should do that. Because when you're holding stuff and you're trying to get the door open, that's when you get the most wet.
Well, there you go. Stu, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about Roger Zelazny's novel, Jack of Shadows, from 1971. It's a named book in Appendix N. It's in bold, which I think means that it particularly impressed Mr. Gygax and lingered in his mind as he was coming up with Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, so I read this book. For folks who have read this, this might be funny. I was recently on vacation in a tropical island, and instead of doing things like going to the beach, I just sat around and read books. One of which was Fritz Lieber's Swords and Ice Magic, which is not really tropical at all. And I followed that up with Jack of Shadows, also not very tropical or sunny in atmosphere or attitude. This is a nasty, ugly, mean-ass book, man.
So light vacation fare is what you're saying.
Yeah. I didn't really know that going in. I thought it was going to be more akin to Amber, the 10-volume series that Zelazny did that was sort of fusion of like high concept fantasy, science fiction, and hard boiled detective stories. That's sort of a conspiracy, a magical romp that does get super violent and crazy, but it never loses its wry sense of humor. I thought more of the same because Jack of Shadows is a thief. I believe he really contributed to the notion of the rogue for Dungeons and Dragons, even though they don't have like magic powers like Jack does. But he is a master thief in the novel, and I thought, well, you know, he'll be a little bit of a swashbuckling ne'er-do-well like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse or something. And maybe he was at one time, but boy, when this book hits, he is sour as all get out. So it's a strange book in a number of ways. All my qualifications, I love this book. It was freaking great. It's just, there's a lot to reckon with here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm like reckoning with most is that you in a tropical like paradise. In my head canon, it's like you're wearing like a brimmed sun hat, a Cuban shirt, still wearing long pants and boots, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had boots on the entire trip.
And reading like this like spooky looking like pulp, like, you know, soft cover book, but with like a pina colada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mai Tais, but yeah.
Fair play.
So yeah, it's an odd book in its construction. You can tell that there's something interesting going on with the process of the writing, just because it fires like a cannon. I read this basically within 24 hours, 2 sittings, essentially. It runs at a pace that is just unbelievable. And apparently that's because Zelazny wrote it. It's a first draft. There was no revisions, no time lost. He banged this thing out and it was done. So there's a lot of stuff like in the fantasy and the science fiction of it that gets remarked upon. It all makes sense, but there's a lot less, you know, of the gritty details that you might otherwise expect. He doesn't stop to explain a lot of the stuff that's going on.
Did he like have a moment where he's like, we'll do it in post, and then like post never comes? Like, good enough. We already printed it. What edits?
If I read it a second time, I might be able to pick out a couple things, but it works really well as it is. And I actually appreciate the fact that he doesn't bother to explain this stuff because it's besides the point. But let me set the stage a little bit about the world that Jack is from. It's tidally locked, which means that it doesn't rotate. Half of the planet is in shadow at all times, like a perpetual night, and the other half is perpetually day. And at the equator is sort of this twilight zone. Not like that kind of Twilight Zone, but the light side is not altogether unlike our own world. It's dominated by science and technology. When he visits there, it is recognizably, they have cars and universities, and it seems prosaic, except that the sun never sets. The shadow side, the dark side, on the other hand, is ruled by magic.
Well,
Yeah, there's some interesting things about that I'll get into in a little bit, but basically you just need to know that on the night side is magic. Magic does not work on the sun side, and technology doesn't work on the night side. Weirdly, both sides have different sort of theories of the universe. Whereas, like, the light side believes that stars are what we think of as stars, whereas the night side believes that stars are just distant entities or demons that can be summoned down and stuff. And even though those two theories are in contradiction, they're true. They work. If you're on the right side of things, it works. And weirdly, the night side people believe that the world is tidally locked because of a machine that's at the heart of the world. Whereas the light side, despite being ruled by science, believes that there's demons and earth and fire elementals at the center of the earth, keeping the planet not moving. It's weird.
that is definitely weird.
And as I said, doesn't get explained. It's just, it is really just high concept that sets the stage for the action. Jack is a power of the night side of the world. He has the ability to manipulate and disappear and move through shadows. He has a whole castle that is in the shadow realm that only he can visit. And because of this power, he's a master thief, and he's stolen lots and lots of things.
I mean, what else are you going to do with it? You know?
So here's the other weird thing. People on the light side are conventional people like you and me. We die at the end of our lives, and we don't come back. The other side of that is that lightsiders have souls, apparently, whereas the nightsiders don't have souls. And every time they die, they come back a couple years later in this awful place. It's like a mud field, like with rotting stuff. It's horrible. And then they make their way back to their old lives. They can come back a certain amount of times. No one knows how many times they can come back, but most of them have a lot of chances. Again, also very weird. The book starts out by establishing that Jack is a master thief, and then has him get sort of his spot gets blown up as he hasn't even started the heist yet. He gets captured by the cops, so they cut his head off. And it turns out to be part of, a larger plot by his arch nemesis, the Lord of Bats.
Okay, that's cool.
It's basically Dracula. And Dracula uses this as a way to steal Jack's girlfriend, basically, while Jack is dead in the interim. And then once Jack comes back, the Lord of Bats captures him and then basically torments him a little bit. They apparently had some beef in the past, not really explained. And being captured makes Jack absolutely insane. And he swears to get revenge on the Lord of Bats, on his ex-girlfriend, on everybody who's ever done him wrong, including maybe the entirety of the world that he lives on.
That's ambitious.
So, and it's just like, okay, this is a fantasy story. So, like, yeah, this is his dark moment. Like, he's just like, he's pushed to the limit, and he's gonna do something, and maybe it's gonna be a little bit terrible, but he's gonna, like, there's gonna be a twist, or like some hidden part of his plan that's gonna be for the good of all things. Like it's gonna turn out okay in the end. He eventually escapes the Lord of Bats, goes off to the light side, gets a job as a professor at a university, basically to get access to their computers, uses the computers to find a way to get this thing called the key that was lost, which is like this artifact that makes him all powerful on the night side. And then he goes back with his all powerful artifact now, and basically kills, tortures, rapes, torments everyone who is his enemy.
Oh, so he's like full on terrible.
Yeah, no, he like about halfway through the book, they change his name from Jack of Shadows to Jack of Evil. Like,
A little on the nose, but okay.
he's awful. And it's really interesting because he really goes beyond the pale almost immediately. As soon as he gets the power, he just starts doing terrible stuff to everyone he can basically get in close contact with. And it's really, really strange because the entire time I'm reading this book, I'm really pulling for him to stop it, to pull out of the dive and to like make it right. Like none of the people that he necessarily screws over are good people, and but they also kind of don't deserve it as bad as they get. And it feels really strange. Also, because I never, as much as I started to loathe Jack, I never stopped rooting for him. He's always just likable enough that you stay on his side, even though he's really pushing you away the entire time. And at the end of of course, at the end of the book, because they talk about the engines at the center of the earth, he goes down there and he breaks it, and that basically destroys the balance of things. The world starts to orbit and turn. There is no more dedicated light side, dark side. No one knows what this is going to happen, and because of this, and then the book sort of ends on an enigmatic note with him falling off a castle and probably dying, and his only friend maybe coming to rescue him, but his only friend also might have been manipulating all of this so that there'd be dawn and like a cycle of night and dark so that he could escape his imprisonment. There's like a lot of weird things in it. Not a lighthearted book at all. Really mean-spirited, really hard, like not hard to read, fantastically easy to read, but like a really like perplexing read. And I haven't actually stopped thinking about it since. And it lines up with a lot of like, there's I don't want to say that D&D makes people play like mean, power hungry characters, but like there is a little bit of that in there.
I mean, well,
Jack's shadow abilities, I don't think of as something that's particularly tied to first edition, but they certainly come into play as you get into later iterations of the game, the semi-plane of shadow and shadow walking and all those later edition abilities. Like they all just come right out of Jack. The thing I think is most interesting about this book is not something that Gygax was really involved in at all, but there's a number of powers of the dark side of the world. And they all have names like the Lord of Bats or Jack of Shadows or the Colonel who is never killed, and like a whole bunch of other weird stuff. They're all like super powerful magic users, and they all draw their power from the place where they were created, and that becomes sort of like their domain. Powerful lords of darkness, domains in a shadowy world is very much like Ravenloft.
Yeah, I mean,
especially with one guy walking around named the Lord of Bats.
I mean,
like when I got to that point, there were like little pieces that you kind of keep hitting, and then all of a sudden I was just like, crap, this is Ravenloft a decade before Ravenloft, and it's kind of it's really interesting in that regard. 1971 came out. He did a couple of prequels, but never did anything like a follow-up, even though a lot of people wanted him to.
So like, he had the opportunity to go back and like, I could finish the story. I could take it over. We could find out what happens to Jack after he goes ass over tea kettle from the castle. But no, we're gonna leave that dangling.
Yeah, no, I believe that he just really enjoyed the ambiguity of the ending. And I think it's a good ending. Like it really is like if you're going to leave it on a note like that, it's a pretty good one. Like like as Jack is falling, he's talking about how he could see his friend Morningstar. Morningstar. That's not a sinister name at all.
Not at all.
Flying. So he was part stone. He was like part of a mountain range, and his upper torso was like flesh and bone, and he was just like cursed by the gods to be there until he's witnessed the dawn. And then of course Jack makes the dawn happen, and he's falling off this thing, and he's talking about how he's falling off of this precipice, and he can see Morningstar flying through the air, and like the last line is like, I don't know if he's gonna get here in time to catch me. And like it's kind of a nice way to end it. And at that point, like you're really done with Jack. Like he's a terrible person. There's this whole thing where his soul shows up, and is like his soul is like begging him for the last quarter of the book to like be joined. And he's just like, let's get together. I can help you with this. And he's just like not having it. He's like, get away from me. And it's really funny,
So
but it's also really horrible at the same time.
I can help you knock it off. Let's just knock it off. You can stop. I can help. No.
So yeah, like Jack falling off of a tower because of his own hubris, possibly to his death. Like that's where I want to leave Jack, actually. Like as much as I want to know more about the world and stuff, like it's okay. Nasty business, that book. But good. Definitely worth the read.
I mean, that's awesome. And it's still cool that like we're almost 6 years into this.
Yeah.
And like we're still not fully through like talking about stuff that appeared on Appendix N.
No, I mean that's a long list. That I'm surprised that I've hacked through as much of it as I have. I'm still working on Fafhrd of the Grey Mouser. I have one more book that I've never read, the last one. It's gonna be sad.
Now, are you like holding off on that for a little while? Like you're like waiting, like because you're like gonna savor it, like because that's it.
I'm definitely reading it this year.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to finish things and to move on to something else because there's tons of great art there, tons of great stories out there. But yeah, it's always interesting when you come to the end of like a storyline. You're like, all right, like it's not like in comics where like recently I recall seeing on the and we talked about it on the Instagram we talked about that you're going back through Hellblazer,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think the interesting thing with comics is that you have like kind of an open playground that you could just show up and play with the toys that are there,
Yeah.
like it's, you want to write John Constantine, like you could jump in, like if they were willing to listen to your pitch, you could write John Constantine and kind of run with it. Whereas like something like these stories are very specifically written by like a person.
Yeah.
And once that person's gone, unless it's like some kind of massive hit where they get the rights, some company gets the rights to kind of run with it, like that's it. Like once you finish Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, like there are other people I'm sure who've written Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser stories, but like that's the last Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser story. There's
a follow-up novel. I don't recall the name of the author, but there's a novel that came out, I think, after Fritz died, Swords Against the Shadowland, and I think that's the name of it. And like, I don't know if I want to read it. Like, I don't know if that counts. Like, like I appreciate the idea. Like, I love these characters too, but like, from my understanding, like they kind of grow old and they're content at the end of the last book that Fritz put together. So I don't know if I need more of that. Speaking of John Constantine, though, by the way, speaking like shitheads, like, wow, that guy in the first couple arcs of that comic book, it's just really like very much like Jack, easy to like, but also extremely hard to continue to like. Like, completely self-interested, self-serving, not a helpful bone in his body. Like he sees horrible things happen and doesn't lift a finger.
It's like toxic, right?
It's so bad.
And then like eventually he kind of like gets it together and you're like, wow, he's kind of, having emotional growth and he's turning a corner. And then like you're only ever like 5 to 7 issues away from him backsliding and being like, nah, I'm a piece of shit. I'm gonna roll around in it.
He absolutely he is so instrumental in the death of everyone around him that he's maybe the one comic book character that maybe they should retire just because like you can't keep doing that and have it not be like kind of silly after a while.
Yeah, at some point it's a parody of him being like an unintentional serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. That's fucking John Constantine, man. You have any final thoughts on the vacation reading?
I also read The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is about a human colony on a forest world where these little moss people live, and they're sort of enslaved by the humans who are colonizing, and they're cutting down all the trees, and then they have an uprising, and then they really kick the humans' butts. I didn't think that would resonate. It's the one I read right after Jack of Shadows, and I didn't think I was like, oh, this is a science fiction book about like, what if the Ewoks like were cool, and and had like a planetary uprising and made the humanity flee. And I didn't think I was like, what could these two books have in common? But there's a lot It's interesting how much reading those two books in proximity has made me even more continuing to think about both of them and how there's like these weird interplays in terms of like violence and the lengths will go for things and stuff like that. So I think that Jack of Shadows is an excellent novel that has clear impacts on Dungeons and Dragons. But if you want an interesting pairing, like wine with steak, I suggest following it up with The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin.
If I could go back in time, and I'm not saying this for our wonderful editor Alex to take it back and slap this at the beginning, but I think now that I've actually kind of sat with the episode and switched it around a little bit, I think my initial joke would be, he definitely doesn't buy his vacation books at the airport. Stu Horvath.
Oh man, I went to the Hudson Books in Newark Airport and looking for my book, and they did it, and I stomped off and I said, I'm never coming to this airport again. Everybody was like, what are you talking about? Like, they're not going to sell your 5-pound book at the airport, you idiot.
I mean, in fairness, have you seen the backs of the seat in front of you, like the shallow thing? There's only enough room for like the Sky Mall catalog.
Right, yeah.
Your book is a damn sight bigger than the Sky Mall catalog. This is another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. It is the very end of Zine Quest and Zine Month, and whatever us independent creators are pitching and trying to get our books made during that time frame. So if you haven't yet, you could head on over to anywhere where I am on social media and check out Death by Dino. It's Children of Uma, Death by Dino. Yes, if you're hearing this episode now, we changed the name midstream, and it is the same amazing adventure, the same great story, post-apocalyptic vehicles, and the wild teenagers who drive them versus dudes on dinosaurs. But, the great thing about being a small independent creator is when you realize something's not working, you can pivot. So one more day on Kickstarter only, 321 Action Games presents Children of Uma, Death by Dino, a vehicle battle RPG. I met Stu the other day. I was like, hey, could you put this up? And you were like, change the name?
I was very confused.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I was like a major corporation, I had spent hundreds upon thousands of dollars on a marketing budget. Damn, we would have made sure it worked somehow. But, from my basement apartment hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey, I could pivot a little bit. And I did. Other Kickstarters going on right now. Neon Lords RPG has a killer minis campaign going on right now. We're probably about a few days into it by the time you hear this episode. I was at TotalCon previous to now, and I had a killer game of Neon Lords with Ian McGarty, Silver Boulet. He's going to be putting out that adventure soon, and I will tell you, everything that I told you about Neon Lords is spot on the money. If you're comfortable with BX, you're going to love this game. Other things of note that are on Kickstarter right now, Swivers will be in its last few days. We had the cats on from Swivers chatting about that game, which I know is going to be amazing. Speaking of cats, Dungeon Cats from our friends over at Epic Levels probably has a couple days left by the time you hear this. Recently, we had the fine folks from Canon Otter Studios on to talk about Teenage Odyssey. They have a little bit longer to go left on their Kickstarter for Teenage Odyssey for Mark of the Odd. Toku Legends will be done by then. Trick or Treat. Yeah, Trick or Treat by Lewis Hoffer, Dare Luck Club's RPG Zine Adventure will probably have a day or two left on Kickstarter as well. I'm trying to get you guys to spend as much money as possible because, in fairness, like when normally we make things go up in cost, these are exactly what they're going to charge from on Kickstarter. So go check it out. Go support your local independent RPG creators because the more of them you support, the more episodes we get to make of this show because we're going to talk about them. Stu, where can people find you on the internets?
They can find me on Instagram, posting day in, day out. I did start working on the 2025 posts.
Yeah, you did.
I had a couple minutes and I'm just like, I'm going to be busy later in the year. Maybe I should get some of this done now.
Yep. Might as well knock it out when you can. You can find me across social media at John McGuire RPG. I am posting more these days because, I'm promoting. I'm leaving the house. I'm doing multiple conventions. By the time you hear this, I will be probably on the way to Game Face Con down in Maryland. Check it out at GameFaceCon.com. It is at the Peabody Heights Brewery Saturday, March 9th and Sunday, March 10th. most of the people you've heard me talk about recently are going to be down there. There's an arcade and there is a bar. They have an exclusive beer dedicated to RPG 2E and Planescape Legends Zeb Cook. Tons of cool stuff going on. It's part of my Contour 24, and that's the next stop. Will be at Game Face. If you are at GaryCon when you hear this episode, I will be roaming around the halls of GaryCon. I'll be popping into some panels for writing. I might be running some after-hour games for action, and generally just hanging out, eating snacks, shaking hands, giving high fives, and celebrating the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We got a behind-the-scenes look at whatever Stu is currently working on. We got a behind-the-scenes look at 3-2-1 action. And believe me when I say Stu is working on some cool stuff, we just can't talk about it yet. We got a behind-the-scenes look at 3-2-1 action and the cool stuff that I'm working on. Early release episodes for as little as $1 a month. That'll come out on sometime like Friday or Saturday, depending on when we record them in the week and get them back from editing, depending on when we record them in the week. We have a tier where you can play games with me once a month, and I run all different types of games. The time you hear this, I would have run another Cthulhu adventure. Next month, I will be running Neon Lords for sure. You have a tier where you can play in a West Marches campaign with Stu, and we have a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.